For 38 years, Marcus Webb lived as a ghost. Officially dead, buried with military honors, his name carved into the memorial wall at Bud's training facility. But Marcus wasn't dead. He was hiding. When news broke about the fisherman's discovery, Marcus knew his time in the shadows was over. The case his teammates had thrown overboard before their final mission contained proof of a conspiracy that started in the Cold War and never ended. Now, as the only surviving member of SEAL Team Echo, Marcus must choose: remain dead and safe, or resurface to expose the truth that cost his brothers their lives. If this story moves you, subscribe for more tales of heroes whose sacrifices remain hidden in the shadows of history. The morning fog hung thick over Monterey Bay as Captain Mike Torres prepared his nets for another day of commercial fishing. At 67, he had been working these waters for over 4 decades. His weathered hands knew every current, every reef, every secret the Pacific held. Today felt different, though. The water had an unusual stillness, and the fish seemed to be avoiding his usual spots. As Torres lowered his nets near Point Reyes, about 12 miles offshore, he felt the familiar tug of a substantial catch. But as he began to haul in the lines, the weight felt wrong. Too heavy, too rigid. Not the fluid resistance of fish, but something solid, unyielding. When the nets finally broke the surface, Torres stared in disbelief. Tangled in the mesh was a large, military-grade waterproof case, barnacle-encrusted but intact. Stenciled on its side, barely visible through marine growth, were the letters USN and a date, October 15, 1987. Torres had seen military debris before. Training exercises occasionally left equipment behind. But this case felt different. It was deliberately weighted, meant to stay on the bottom forever. As he carefully extracted it from his nets, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. 5 SEAL trident pins, corroded but still recognizable, attached to the case with braided paracord. 3 hours later, Torres sat in the Monterey Harbor Master's office, the case unopened on the table before him. Harbor Master Janet Reynolds had seen her share of unusual finds, but military equipment always meant paperwork and federal agencies. "You did the right thing bringing this in, Mike," Reynolds said, photographing the case from multiple angles. "I'm calling this into the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They'll want to examine it." "Those pins," Torres said quietly, pointing to the tridents. "That's SEAL Team insignia, isn't it?" Reynolds nodded grimly. "Looks like it, which means this isn't just debris. This is somebody's memorial." Within 6 hours, NCIS Special Agent Lisa Chen arrived from San Francisco. At 42, Chen had investigated everything from submarine accidents to espionage cases, but something about this recovery felt significant. The precision of the weighting, the deliberate placement in deep water, the age of the equipment. It all suggested this wasn't an accident. "The case is locked with a military-grade combination," Chen reported to her supervisor over the phone. "We're going to need specialized equipment to open it without damaging the contents." "Any indication of which unit it belonged to?" her supervisor asked. Chen examined the trident pins more closely under a magnifying glass. "The pins are custom engraved. I can make out partial text on one of them, ECHO 1987. The rest is too corroded to read." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Agent Chen, I need you to secure that case immediately. Full chain of custody protocols. Don't open it until you get clearance from Washington." "Sir, is there something specific about SEAL Team Echo from 1987? "Just secure the evidence, Agent. I'll get back to you." Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away in a small cabin outside Flagstaff, Arizona, Marcus Webb was watching the news with growing dread. The CNN report was brief. Military equipment recovered from Monterey Bay. But it was enough. The reporter mentioned SEAL tridents and a date, 1987. Marcus muted the television and walked to his bathroom mirror. The face staring back at him was 60 years old, weathered by decades of manual labor and sleepless nights. Gray stubble-covered scars that plastic surgery had tried to hide. His eyes, once the confident blue of an elite operator, now held the wary caution of a man who had lived too long with secrets. He opened the medicine cabinet and retrieved a small metal box hidden behind aspirin bottles. Inside were items he hadn't looked at in years: a faded photograph of 5 young men in dress blues, a tarnished SEAL trident pin, and a newspaper clipping from October 1987. 5 Navy SEALs presumed dead in training accident. Marcus studied the photograph. Danny Morrison, 24, from Tennessee. Communications specialist with a gift for languages and a terrible joke-telling habit. Kevin Hart, 26, from Michigan. Explosives expert who could disarm any device but couldn't fix a broken toaster. Alex Rodriguez, 23, from Texas. Medic who once saved a village of children from a cholera outbreak on their own time. Jake Sullivan, 25, from Maine. Point man who could track a shadow across concrete. And there in the center, Marcus Webb, 22, from Ohio. The kid who had believed the Navy would never sacrifice its own people for political convenience. He had been so naive. The briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command was unusually crowded. 5 members of SEAL Team Echo sat at attention as Commander David Halsey entered, followed by 2 men in civilian clothes who didn't bother to introduce themselves. "Gentlemen," Halsey began, his voice carrying the weight of classified authority, "what I'm about to tell you doesn't exist. This briefing never happened. Your mission parameters are compartmentalized at the highest levels." Marcus exchanged glances with Rodriguez. In their 18 months as a team, they had never seen their commander this serious. 3 days ago, a Soviet submarine was detected 12 miles off the California coast. The sub suffered catastrophic damage from an apparent collision with an undersea mountain. It's currently resting at 400 feet beyond immediate Soviet recovery capabilities. One of the civilians stepped forward. "The submarine contains nuclear materials and advanced sonar technology that cannot be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. However, we also cannot allow the Soviets to know we've recovered it." "So what's our mission?" Sullivan asked. "Underwater demolition," the second civilian replied. "You'll use advanced mixed gas diving equipment to reach the submarine, place charges, and destroy it completely. The detonation will appear to be a delayed result of the original collision." Marcus felt a chill. "What about the crew, Soviet submariners?" "Intelligence suggests no survivors," Halsey said quickly. "The boat has been dark since the initial impact." The first civilian opened a briefcase and removed 5 sealed envelopes. "Your individual assignments. Study them, memorize them, then destroy them. Questions?" "Timeline," Morrison asked. "Departure is 0200 tomorrow. The operation must be completed before Soviet recovery vessels arrive, which intelligence estimates at 96 hours. As the team filed out, Marcus noticed Hart whispering something to Rodriguez. Both men looked troubled, but when Marcus approached, they simply shook their heads. "Later," Rodriguez mouthed silently. The secure phone in Marcus's bedroom had been silent for 15 years. Its sudden ring made him jump like a spooked cat. Only 3 people in the world had that number, and 2 of them were supposed to be dead. "Hello, Marcus." The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. Thomas Brennan, former CIA operations director, the man who had handed them their death sentences in 1987. "I wondered when you'd call," Marcus said. "Turn on the news, Channel 7. Marcus switched to the local station. A breaking news banner read, "Military experts called to examine recovered naval equipment." "They found the case," Brennan said unnecessarily. "I figured as much when fishing boats started calling in mysterious debris." Marcus sat down heavily. "How long do we have?" "NCIS opened it 2 hours ago. They found Rodriguez's photographs." Marcus closed his eyes. Alex Rodriguez had been their team's conscience, the one who insisted on documenting everything after they discovered the truth about their mission. If those photos survived 38 years underwater, the government's entire narrative was about to collapse. "What do you want from me, Thomas?" "The same thing I've wanted for 4 decades, your continued cooperation in keeping this buried. My friends are dead because of that cooperation. Your friends are dead because they chose to become liabilities. You chose differently. That's why you're alive to have this conversation." Marcus walked to his window, looking out at the Arizona mountains where he had hidden for most of his adult life. "What's in it for me this time? Another new identity, another decade of looking over my shoulder. How about your life? The people who ordered that mission are still alive, Marcus, still powerful. They've waited 38 years to make sure this stays buried. They'll wait another 38 if necessary." After Brennan hung up, Marcus sat in silence for nearly an hour. Finally, he made a decision. He walked to his bedroom closet and moved aside a false panel, revealing items he hadn't touched in years: a military duffel bag, a passport in his real name, and a loaded .45 caliber pistol. It was time to stop running. Special Agent Chen stared at the contents of the waterproof case spread across the evidence table. 47 photographs, all in remarkable condition thanks to military-grade preservation techniques. 15 pages of handwritten notes in multiple handwriting styles. 5 personal items: a wedding ring, a St. Christopher medal, a letter addressed to Mom and Dad, a harmonica, and a child's drawing labeled "For Uncle Danny." but it was the typed document that made her hands shake. Operation Nightfall, classified mission parameters, Soviet submarine, SSN-67, Kazan, crew complement 127 souls. The photographs told a story that contradicted everything in the official record. They showed the team's descent to the submarine, the discovery that the boat was intact and not heavily damaged, and most damning of all, evidence that the crew was alive and attempting to signal for rescue. Chen picked up one photograph that made her stomach turn. It showed Hart and Sullivan inside the submarine's forward compartment where Soviet sailors had barricaded themselves in the torpedo room. Through the bulkhead window, frightened faces were clearly visible. Rodriguez's handwritten notes accompanied the photo. Day 2. Submarine crew alive. Estimated 30-plus survivors in forward compartments, sending distress signals on emergency frequencies. Command aware, ordered us to proceed with demolition anyway. Hart refuses to set charges. Team solidarity, we cannot murder these men. The final photograph showed all 5 team members on the submarine's deck, making hand signals toward the surface. Hart was clearly pointing upward and making abort mission gestures. Chen's secure phone rang. Her supervisor's voice was grim. Agent Chen, you need to see the evening news. Channel 4. Chen turned on the conference room television. A news anchor was interviewing a man she didn't recognize, middle-aged with graying hair and the bearing of a former military officer. This is Marcus Webb, the anchor was saying, who claims to be the sole survivor of a 1987 naval incident that the Pentagon says never happened. Mr. Webb, you're telling us that you've been living under an assumed identity for 38 years? That's correct, Marcus replied calmly. My death was staged to prevent me from testifying about what really happened to SEAL Team Echo. And what did happen? We were ordered to murder 127 Soviet submarine crew members who were trying to surrender. When my teammates refused, they were eliminated. I was offered a choice, disappear forever or join them. The anchor leaned forward. These are extraordinary claims. Do you have proof? Marcus held up a small digital drive. I have copies of everything my teammate Alex Rodriguez documented. The truth about Operation Nightfall, the cover-up that followed, and the names of the officials who ordered the execution of American servicemen to protect a war crime. Chen's phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Agent Chen. This is Admiral Patricia Morse, Chief of Naval Operations. I need you to listen very carefully. The individual on television is a known fugitive wanted in connection with the theft of classified materials. He is not to be treated as a credible witness under any circumstances. Admiral, the evidence we've recovered seems to support his claims. Agent Chen, you are ordered to transfer all materials related to this case to Department of Defense custody immediately. A team is en route to your location. Chen looked at the photographs spread before her, at the faces of young Soviet sailors who had died for nothing more than political expediency. Admiral, with respect, I believe this case requires further investigation by civilian authorities. Agent Chen, you are relieved of duty pending an internal review. Remain at your location and surrender all evidence to the DO-D team upon arrival. After the call ended, Chen made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She gathered the most damning photographs and documents, placed them in a secure envelope, and handed them to her partner. Get these to the press, she said quietly. All of them. Tonight. Marcus sat across from veteran journalist Catherine Walsh, the overhead lights hot on his face. After 38 years of hiding, being in public felt surreal. But Rodriguez's photographs had given him the proof he needed, and the world deserved to know what had happened. Mr. Webb, Walsh began, you've provided us with evidence that suggests a significant cover-up. Walk us through what happened on October 15, 1987. Marcus took a deep breath. We were told it was a demolition mission, destroy a damaged Soviet submarine before it could be recovered. But when we reached the boat, we found survivors, more than 100 men who had survived the initial accident and were waiting for rescue. What were your orders regarding these survivors? Place the charges anyway. Command said Soviet recovery ships would arrive soon, and the submarine's technology was too valuable to risk capture. We were told the crew was already dead. But they weren't. Number Alex Rodriguez documented everything with a waterproof camera. The survivors had managed to seal themselves in compartments that were still intact. They were signaling for help on emergency frequencies. Walsh held up one of the photographs. This image shows what appears to be faces through a window in the submarine. That's the torpedo room. About 30 men had barricaded themselves there. They could see us through the bulkhead windows. They were trying to communicate, asking for help. What did your team do? Marcus's voice grew quiet. We refused to complete the mission. Hart disabled the charges. We surfaced and reported that the submarine was occupied by survivors who required immediate rescue. How did command respond? They ordered us to complete the mission anyway. When we refused again, we were told to stand by for new orders. That's when the attack came. Attack? A coordinated strike from our own forces, explosive charges from above, small arms fire from a circling vessel. We weren't being rescued. We were being eliminated. Walsh leaned forward. How did you survive? Rodriguez had the presence of mind to seal the evidence in a waterproof case and throw it overboard before the final assault. I was wounded in the first explosion, went overboard, and managed to swim to an underwater cave system about half a mile away. I stayed there for 3 days until I was sure the area was clear. And your teammates? Marcus's composure finally cracked. They died believing their country would protect them for doing the right thing. Danny Morrison was shot trying to surrender. Kevin Hart was killed helping Soviet sailors out of a flooded compartment. Jake Sullivan died returning fire to protect Alex Rodriguez while he documented the truth. Alex was executed after he was captured, shot in the head at close range. How do you know these details? Because I watched it happen. I saw everything from the cave, and I've lived with that guilt every day for 38 years. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, Marcus providing details that could only have come from someone who was there. When it ended, Walsh turned to the camera. These allegations, if true, represent one of the most serious cover-ups in modern military history. We've reached out to the Pentagon for comment, but they have declined to respond beyond stating that no operation named Nightfall exists in their records. Defense Secretary Robert Harrison sat in his office watching the news coverage with growing alarm. At 71, he had been a young intelligence analyst in 1987, one of the junior officers who had helped coordinate the cover-up. Now, as one of the most powerful men in American defense establishment, he had everything to lose if the truth came out. His secure phone rang. The voice on the other end was digitally altered, untraceable. Secretary Harrison, I believe we have a problem. Who is this? Someone who helped clean up messes in 1987. Someone who can clean up this mess now. Webb is telling the truth. The photographs prove everything. Yes, which is why Webb needs to be discredited quickly. Mental illness, perhaps. A disturbed veteran with elaborate delusions. It's been done before. Harrison felt sick. I won't authorize action against an American citizen for telling the truth. You already did. 38 years ago. This is just maintenance. The line went dead. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed watching news coverage of his interview. The story was already going viral on social media. Military families were demanding answers. Congressional representatives were calling for investigations. But Marcus knew it wouldn't be enough. The same people who had covered up the truth in 1987 were still in power, still protecting their secrets. They wouldn't let him live long enough to testify before Congress. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Room 347, come alone. You have something that belongs to us. Marcus looked at the message for a long moment, then walked to the window. In the parking lot below, he could see men in dark suits positioning themselves around the hotel exits. Professional, military bearing, black SUVs with government plates. They had found him. Marcus opened his laptop and accessed a cloud storage account he had set up years earlier as insurance. He uploaded every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence Rodriguez had died protecting. Then, he sent links to 30 different news organizations, congressional offices, and human rights groups around the world. If they were going to silence him, the truth would survive anyway. As footsteps approached his door, Marcus sat down at the small desk and began writing a letter. To the families of Danny Morrison, Kevin Hart, Alex Rodriguez, and Jake Sullivan. Your sons died as heroes, refusing to commit murder even when ordered to do so by their own government. They gave their lives to protect innocent people they had never met, and their courage should be remembered forever. They were the best of us, and I am sorry it took me 38 years to find the strength to tell their story. The door exploded inward. The congressional hearing room was packed with media, military families, and government officials. The Senate Armed Services Committee had been investigating the Operation Nightfall revelations for months, despite fierce Pentagon resistance. Senator Elizabeth Warren gavelled the session to order. The committee calls its next witness, former NCIS Special Agent Lisa Chen. Chen approached the witness table carrying a thick folder. Senators, before his death, Marcus Webb provided extensive evidence of a systematic cover-up that included the murder of American servicemen and the destruction of evidence. I believe this committee deserves to know the full truth. Agent Chen, Senator Warren said, in your professional opinion, was Marcus Webb credible? Completely. Every detail he provided checked out. The physical evidence supported his testimony, and after his death, additional witnesses came forward. What witnesses? Retired CIA officers who were involved in the original cover-up, former military personnel who helped stage the training accident, government officials who have carried this secret for decades and finally decided their consciences were more important than their careers. Committee Chairman Senator Jim Inhofe, looking uncomfortable, interrupted. Agent Chen, isn't it possible that Mr. Webb fabricated this evidence? Mental illness among veterans is unfortunately common. Chen opened her folder and removed a photograph. Senator, this is a Soviet naval document recovered from the Kazan submarine by Russian deep-sea recovery teams in 1992. It's the captain's final log entry, written just before the American attack. It lists the names of 127 crew members who were alive and attempting to surrender when they were killed. The committee room fell silent. The Russian government released this document last month as part of their cooperation with our investigation. They had been wondering for 38 years why their rescue operation found evidence of underwater explosions around the wreck site. Senator Warren leaned forward. Agent Chen, what is your recommendation to this committee? Full declassification of all Operation Nightfall materials, Congressional Medal of Honor recommendations for Morrison, Hart, Rodriguez, and Sullivan, and criminal prosecutions for everyone involved in the cover-up who is still alive. As Chen concluded her testimony, a new witness entered the hearing room. Admiral Patricia Morse, the chief of naval operations who had tried to suppress the investigation, approached the witness table under escort by federal marshals. Admiral Morse, Senator Warren said, you are here under subpoena to answer questions about your role in obstructing this investigation. Do you swear to tell the truth? Morse looked out at the packed hearing room, at the families of the dead SEALs, at the cameras broadcasting worldwide. Finally, she spoke. Senators, I've spent my entire career believing that some secrets were worth protecting. I was wrong. The men of SEAL Team Echo died because they refused to become murderers. They deserved better from their country, and I'm prepared to tell you everything I know about the people who betrayed them. The memorial service was attended by hundreds of people. 5 new headstones had been added to the military section, each bearing the name of a SEAL Team Echo member and the Congressional Medal of Honor insignia. Marcus Webb's headstone was larger than the others, with an inscription that read, "He lived 38 years to tell their story." Linda Morrison Harris, Danny's widow, placed flowers on each grave. She was joined by the families of Hart, Rodriguez, and Sullivan, all of whom had finally learned the truth about how their loved ones died. They were the best of us, she said quietly to the assembled crowd. They chose death before dishonor, and they saved innocent lives even when their own government abandoned them. As the ceremony concluded, a young woman approached the graves carrying a folder. She was Dr. Sarah Petrov, a Russian naval historian who had flown in from Moscow specifically for this service. Mrs. Morrison Harris, she said in accented English, my grandfather was Captain Mikhail Petrov, commander of the submarine Kazan. Your husband saved his life and the lives of 126 other men by refusing to follow his orders. In Russia, we have not forgotten this sacrifice. She handed Linda a letter written in Russian with an English translation attached. To the families of the American heroes, your sons gave their lives so that our sons could live. In Russia, they are remembered as brothers who chose humanity over politics. Their names are inscribed in our naval memorial in Severodvinsk, and their story is taught to our naval cadets as an example of true honor. They will not be forgotten. As the families read the letter, Linda looked back at the 5 graves and smiled through her tears. After 38 years of lies, the truth was finally free. And in a world often divided by politics and nationalism, 5 American heroes had bridged the gap by simply choosing to do what was right. The story of SEAL Team Echo became required reading at the Naval Academy. Operation Nightfall was declassified and studied as an example of how good people can resist evil orders, even at the cost of their lives. And in both America and Russia, naval officers began their careers knowing that true honor sometimes requires the courage to say no to your own government. Marcus Webb had kept his final promise to his teammates. Their story was told, their sacrifice was honored, and the truth had set them all free.